Mop and chains. The industrial sky above N'rak Tul was never clear. Thick plumes of smoke coiled from the Dominion's furnaces, blackening the alien sun. Down below, in the chemical sludge pits, the stench of melted metal and scorched flesh was permanent, like the slavery. Lena coughed, adjusted her ragged mask, and resumed mopping the toxin-slick floor with a worn-out polymer brush. The janitor unit had been at it since the second cycle bell. Her arms ached. Her back throbbed. She kept her eyes low, voice silent. She knew better than to stand out. The Krogar guards didn't need a reason to hit someone. But if they saw you break rhythm, if you paused, even to breathe, they came for blood. Her reflection stared back at her in a puddle of green coolant. Once she'd been something. An engineer for the Terran Frontier Corps. Married, independent, smiling. That woman was long buried, replaced by someone who knew that surviving meant shrinking. "Oi, human," came a guttural snarl. She froze. 3 Krogar approached, hulking, tusked beasts in black armor. At the center was Grex, foreman of this sector. His whiptail swayed behind him like a serpent, and his lips peeled into a sneer. Lena straightened, quietly bracing. "Still alive, are you?" Grex rumbled, tapping his shock baton into his palm. "Didn't think your bones could last this long. Maybe we ought to test how flexible they are." The others chortled. Lena said nothing. She focused on the mop, on not trembling. "Hey," one Krogar said, stepping closer. "She thinks she's better than us. I say we wipe that look off her face." Grex didn't wait for agreement. His baton cracked against her side. Pain flared white in her ribs. She collapsed to one knee, gasping. Then came a kick to her stomach, another to her face. She felt blood in her mouth. Her vision blurred. Around her, other slaves stared, frozen. No one moved. No one could. To interfere was to die. "Still think you're untouchable?" Grex growled, lifting her by her collar. "Look at you, janitor. Trash. Where's that Terran spirit now?" She coughed, spitting blood onto his boots. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. Grex laughed. "A mistake? Beating a human?" She looked up at him with one swollen eye. "You touched the wrong one." The Krogar frowned. "What's that supposed to?" Her voice was barely audible. "Tell Jack he'll come." She was dropped like refuse. Grex gave her one last stomp for good measure before walking away. "If he wants you, he can come pick up what's left." She lay still in the filth, her breath shallow, her mind foggy. But the name had been said. Someone would carry it. And Jack would hear it. Hours later, deep in the waste tunnels, Tomas, a young mechanic from Earth's fringe colonies, stared down at Lena's battered body. She barely moved, barely breathed, but her message had seared into his mind. Jack! She had spoken the name like it was a weapon. "I'll get him," Tomas said, though he had no idea how. "I swear." In a hidden shack below the slave dorms, Tomas activated an ancient transmitter embedded in the wall. It had taken him years to patch it together from stolen scrap and hope. He tuned it to the old Terran militia frequencies, now outlawed by the Dominion. Static, then crackling. He took a breath. To any human listening, this is Tomas, slave ID 7238X. On N'rak Tul, they beat Lena, the janitor. She said, "Tell Jack." She said he'd come. "If you're out there, whoever you are, she needs you." He transmitted the coordinates. Then he destroyed the relay. They'd trace it. They always did. He ran. High above the atmosphere, in a forgotten quadrant of space, the signal echoed through ancient frequencies until it reached a silent moon cloaked in dark matter shielding. Inside a quiet shelter beneath the rocky surface, a man sat cross-legged, welding a power conduit. He looked older than his years. Scars crisscrossed his arms. His face was half hidden beneath a hood. The beacon blinked red. He paused. When a name came through the static, Lena, his hand tightened. Then he heard the message. She said, "Tell Jack." Slowly he stood. He walked to the sealed locker in the far corner and opened it. The lights inside flickered to life, revealing matte black armor lined with energy core muscles and a helmet shaped like a hammerhead. The nameplate on the chest read, Juggernaut 09. Jack looked at the gear, and for the first time in years, the war inside him woke. The sleeping weapon. The Juggernaut armor hissed as Jack clamped the breastplate into place. The suit recognized him immediately, biometrics still valid after all these years. Internal systems booted up with a low hum, scanning his vitals, syncing with his pulse, syncing with his fury. Juggernaut 09 online. Systems functional. Core charge 87%. He stood still for a long moment, staring at his reflection in the obsidian visor. This wasn't the man Lena married. This wasn't the man who laid down arms after the Terran collapse and promised her peace. This was the weapon he buried, and someone had just dug it up. Jack moved swiftly through the darkened corridors of his lunar refuge. He activated hidden panels, accessing long-forgotten caches, high-yield pulse grenades, magnetic breachers, a full blade sharp enough to slice exo-armor, and his custom railgun, Thor's Whisper, which hadn't fired since the last days of the Human Core War. Each click, each locked magazine, was a drumbeat of purpose. He loaded everything into the drop pack, his movements methodical. But he wasn't going alone. The outer comms relay was still linked to an encrypted line, one he hadn't used in nearly a decade. He tapped into frequency with muscle memory, half hoping no one would answer. Then the screen blinked. A woman's face appeared, half her head replaced with combat-grade synth plating. A single glowing eye scanned him. "Jack," she said, voice flat but edged with surprise. "Is this a joke?" He didn't smile. "It's Lena." A pause. "Dead?" she asked. "Not yet, but close. Krogar sector. N'rak Tul." Her human eye narrowed. "Grex still runs that dump. I should have vaporized him when I had the chance." "I'm going in," Jack said. "I need an insertion route." "I need you." She leaned back in her chair, scanning through displays. "Been waiting to burn something again." "Valles," he said, his voice dropping low. "This isn't just a strike." She raised an eyebrow. "It's a message." They met at the fringe of the Zarthian Dead Zone, where ancient wrecks of alien wars drifted like ghosts. Valles brought the Razor Shrike, her personal stealth corvette, fitted with pulse dampeners and cloaking fields sharp enough to dodge Dominion sensors. The reunion was brief. Jack wasn't here to reminisce. "She was your wife, right?" Valles asked as they entered the launch bay. "She is," Jack corrected. Valles nodded. "Then let's go remind the galaxy why juggernauts were banned." Midway through the journey, Jack sat alone in the armory, running checks on his weapons. His mind wandered back to Lena. He remembered the first time they met, when she was his field engineer and he was the steel brute she had to keep from overheating mid-battle. She never treated him like a machine, never looked at him with fear, just curiosity and compassion. When the war ended, she begged him to walk away. They bought a small home on the frontier, grew tomatoes in nutrient towers, laughed, and then the Dominion came. Slowly, quietly. A trade pact here, a military checkpoint there, until the colonies vanished under chains. Jack had let her go, told her to run when the first slave raids began. She refused, said she could stay hidden. She'd scrub floors, hide her knowledge. He should have known. He should have gone with her. Now she was broken on a foreign world, and monsters thought that was the end of the story. They were wrong. N'rak Tul loomed in the viewport, a filthy orange orb covered in scorch marks and extraction scars. Massive refineries jutted out from the crust like diseased limbs. A Dominion cruiser orbited above, its hull bristling with turrets. Valles hovered near the planet's shadow. "Orbital scans show troop barracks here," she said, pointing. "Slave zones here, Lena's last position marked in Sector 9. Heavy resistance if we go loud." Which I assume we're doing. Jack stood beside her, loading his last magazine. "We're not here for stealth. We're here to make history." "Then let's drop the hammer." She guided the Razor Shrike into a controlled descent, engaging cloak and burning low across the planet's crust. The ship screamed through the canyons, dodging sensor towers. Jack stood in the drop bay, boots magnetized to the deck, railgun in hand. Valles triggered the hatch. Wind roared in. "Time to wake the galaxy up," she said. Jack stepped forward and leapt into the fire. On the ground, The Krogar guards patrolling the slave yards barely had time to raise their weapons before a black meteor tore through the sky and crashed into their perimeter wall. The impact sent shockwaves across the yard. Dust cleared. A massive figure rose from the crater, armor black as void, eyes glowing red. Juggernaut had landed, and he had come for blood. Welcome to hell. The Krogar perimeter alarm screamed in distorted tones, garbled by the sheer force of Juggernaut's impact. Soldiers scrambled from barracks, some half-armored, others barely awake. They were used to punishing defenseless laborers, not fighting gods. Jack rose from the crater like a demon from legend. Juggernaut. 09, in full combat plating, his silhouette glowing with kinetic shielding and heat-shedding lines. Dust hissed off his armor as the railgun on his shoulder swiveled into position. A Krogar officer aimed his blaster. Jack fired first. Thump crack. The railgun barked, and the alien exploded backward in a storm of gore and shattered armor. Panic rippled through the remaining troops. Enemy incursion in slave sector, screamed a comm link. Heavy human assault unit. He's tearing through us. Jack moved like a machine, silent, methodical, merciless. One Krogar charged with a plasma axe. Jack sidestepped, slammed a kinetic fist into the alien's chest, and sent him flying into a wall hard enough to break bone. Before another could aim, Jack was on him, driving a combat blade through his throat. 2 down, 18 to go. Above the battlefield, Valles hovered in the Razor Shrike, feeding Jack live updates. You've got reinforcements inbound from the north compound, hover bikes, and 3 assault mechs. Wanting to soften them, Jack crushed another soldier's helmet with his boot. No, let them come. She gave a grin over the comm, copy that warpath mode engaged. He moved deeper into the compound, where the slave pens were welded shut with rust and contempt. Human workers stared at him with wide eyes, afraid to hope. Jack walked up to the gate. With a hydraulic crunch, he tore the steel bars open with one hand. Get out, he said. An older woman stepped forward, trembling. Who are you? He glanced back, visor gleaming red. I'm Lena's husband. In a dark corner of Sector 9, Lena stirred. She was barely conscious, cradled by a fellow human, her body riddled with bruises and healing nanoscars. Distant booms echoed through the walls. She smiled faintly. You found him, she murmured. Didn't you? The young slave nodded. He's burning the sky. The Krogar commander, Grex, watched the footage in disbelief. He saw his soldiers getting annihilated. He saw the black-armored monster casually ripping turrets from their mounts. He saw the slave cells opening, one after another. This isn't possible, he growled. That's one man. His lieutenant, a four-eyed Varnak, spoke nervously. Our records show. He matches Terran War Unit Juggernaut, 09. Thought terminated post-collapse. Well, he's not terminated now, is he? Greg snarled. Send the Scar mechs. Full charge. And launch the shock drones. He dies now. Back on the battlefield, Jack heard the telltale rumble of mechs approaching. 3 Krogar Scar units, 20-foot-tall walking tanks armed with rotary cannons, stomped into view. Behind them, shock drones buzzed like metallic hornets, ready to fry targets with high-voltage discharges. Jack stopped in the courtyard, alone, facing the mechanized monsters. The mechs opened fire. He sprinted forward. Rounds hammered his kinetic barrier, sending flickers of blue sparks across his armor. But the shield held. He vaulted up a wall, launched off a crate midair, and slammed onto the lead mech's shoulder. With a thundering roar, he drove his pulse blade into its neck joint. Sparks flew. Hydraulic fluid sprayed. The mech stumbled, toppled, and exploded. The shock drones swarmed, but Jack activated an EMP burst. They crashed to the ground in a synchronized death spiral. The second mech charged him. Too slow. Jack activated his gravity anchor, pulling the ground toward him, and punched straight through the mech's leg armor with a seismic blast. It crumpled. The third tried to retreat. Too late. Jack leapt onto its back, tore open the cockpit, and dragged the pilot out screaming. Then silence. The mechs were ash. The courtyard was his. Across N'rak Tul, Humans watched the feed Velez had hacked into the slave network. Jack's armored figure stood above the wreckage of Dominion war machines. To the oppressed, he looked like hope. To the slavers, he looked like retribution. Grex ran. His command center went into lockdown as he activated emergency escape protocols. He hadn't built his reputation on bravery, just cruelty and fear. And right now, he feared Juggernaut more than death itself. "Seal the command gates," he shouted. "Scramble the fighters." Too late, came a voice over the intercom. His blood ran cold. "Grex," the voice said, cold and slow. "You touched my wife." He turned. The blast doors behind him crumpled like paper. Jack walked through the fire. "This is for Lena." Grex stumbled back, ball rising in his throat. The monstrous figure stepped through the smoke and fire, eyes glowing like embers, the armor scorched but intact, radiating heat and hate. Juggernaut. The last time the Dominion encountered one, an entire fleet went dark. Grex had mocked a janitor. Now he faced the husband. "No," the alien hissed, raising his plasma carbine with shaking hands. "You're just a man, just a—" Jack moved. In less than a second, he closed the distance and grabbed Grex by the throat, lifting him off the ground. The plasma rifle clattered to the floor. "I was a man," Jack said, his voice modulated and low. "Then you put your hands on her." He slammed the slaver into the wall with bone-crunching force. Grex gasped, limbs flailing, armor cracking. "I don't care about the Dominion," Jack said coldly. "I don't care about your empire. I care about Lena." He drove his fist into Grex's midsection. Ribs shattered. "You beat her," he growled, slamming him again. "You laughed while she bled." Slam. "You forgot something, Grex." Slam. "She had someone." The final punch left Grex a twitching heap on the floor, barely breathing. Jack stood over him, railgun humming, the barrel lowering toward the alien skull. "This is for Lena." The shot was deafening. The command center walls were splashed with the consequence of cruelty. Outside, chaos reigned. The slave revolt had gone full force. Encouraged by Jack's arrival, hundreds of human workers stormed their former cages. They took up stolen weapons, overwhelmed guard posts, and turned centuries of oppression into fire and rubble. Velez hovered above the battlefield in the Razor Shrike, coordinating comms and jamming Dominion reinforcements. "Jack," she called, "Lena's pod is secured. She's stable. We've cleared you a route out." He said nothing, walking through the halls of the fortress like a grim shadow. Slaver corpses littered the floor. Blood dripped from his armor. Behind him, the command center's fusion core flickered dangerously, primed to overload. "Extraction point in 4 minutes," Velez continued. "But you better run. You lit the whole place on fire." He reached the slave infirmary. Inside, on a shattered medical cot, lay Lena, pale, bruised, but breathing. Her eyes fluttered open as he knelt beside her. "Jack," she rasped. He removed his helmet. His face was older, harder, but unmistakably him. "I'm here." She smiled weakly. "Took you long enough." He laughed softly, a sound choked with emotion, and gently touched her cheek. "I'll never be late again." With Lena secured in his arms, Jack blasted out of the infirmary and sprinted through collapsing corridors as explosions rocked the facility. The auto-destruct had tripped. Dominion systems were failing. The entire fortress was crumbling behind them. As he reached the launch pad, Velez's Razor Shrike dropped into position, rear ramp extended. "Come on, Juggernaut," she shouted over the comms. "We got one shot." Jack leapt aboard just as the ground gave way beneath them. The ship rose. Below, the Krogar command fortress erupted in a hellstorm of flame and light. A pillar of fire roared into the sky, the grave of a tyrant. Later, aboard the Shrike, Jack sat at Lena's bedside. She rested in the med bay, breathing evenly now, bruises fading under human nanotherapy. "You know," she murmured, "I was really hoping I wouldn't have to wake you up." Jack smirked. "You didn't. You just called me home." She reached for his hand. He took it, carefully, as if afraid she'd break. "I saw what you did," she said. "The uprising. You gave them hope." He shook his head. "You gave it to them. I just handed it back with a railgun." She chuckled weakly. Valess appeared in the doorway. We got transmissions from 6 other slave worlds. Humans are rising. They saw the footage. Jack, you lit a fire. I wasn't trying to lead a movement. Valess shrugged. Doesn't matter. You did. Jack looked at Lena, then back to Valess. Then we finished what we started. 3 days later, a message went out across the stars. It showed a still image of Jack in full Juggernaut armor, standing over the ruins of the Dominion fortress. Behind him, the human flag waved on scorched steel. His voice played over the transmission. To every enslaved human in the galaxy, your pain is seen, your suffering is remembered, and your vengeance is coming. You're not alone. You never were. They beat a janitor for fun. Now we burn their thrones for justice. We are humanity, and we are done kneeling.